Okay, I guess I've learned one lesson. That's to destroy every boom rat when you're running tests. Who's that? Oh, some dead scientist. Who cares? Hello, my fellow scientists of various dubious credentials. I am Maddie, and this is Legendary Labs. Today, we're going to take a look at Rimworld, and specifically, the food crop growing mechanics. We're going to compare rice, corn, and potatoes, and look at what they yield over a set period of time in different soil types. So, of course, there are resources online, and you can check in-game to look at the growing time and the fertility response of the different vegetables. But what most of those resources don't give you is kind of an applicable data set of actual yield numbers. So we're going to do just that today. We're going to run some experiments and test different soil types with the same farmers in the same climate multiple times and see what kind of hard numbers we get. Or maybe those are soft numbers. I don't know. They're going to be numbers, and we're going to look at them. So, that's what we got planned, and I say we get right down to it. Let me show you what I got set up here. First of all, got all my mods turned off, except for I have faster dev speed because I am going to run as fast as I can, just so I can simulate lots of time passing. And I do have Prepare Carefully still on because I've got a set of colonists preset ready to go. So I wanted to leave that on. Otherwise, those two mods don't affect anything else in the game whatsoever. So you can rest assured that there's no mods affecting anything, and there's no weird cheating things going on here. So I've got just a little custom scenario set up here, which has just 5 people, no items, which makes it easy. And we're going to set Phoebe Chillax to peaceful. That way we don't have to worry about fighting. That will be just one thing that I want to eliminate. Oh, yeah. Reload anytime. I don't want to worry about raids while I'm simulating time passing. I suppose that is something that you'd have to take into account, but I'm not going to deal with it. So this will be without raids on. So, yeah, whatever, randomize the 30%, that's all good. One thing I am going to do is I'm going to grab the most temperate, middle of the road, easy climate to be part of, which I'm going to go temperate forest, and I'm going to look for a 70-degree average. Try to get somewhere close to like a 55 to 85. So this isn't too bad, but let's see if we can get even better. There we go, just like that. Hop around a couple of these. Yeah. Ooh, right there. That's the one. 70 degrees even is the average. 54 to 86. That's a very mild, temperate, middle of the road climate. Just flat. No need for anything else. Oh, we are going to make this small, because I'm going to run this as fast as I can, and I don't need the extra stuff. So, okay, so we got our Prepare Carefully here. You can see I've got a preset. They are the neutral test subjects. So I've set up 5 colonists here. They're all exactly the same. They're all 30 years old, have no traits, no health issues, and all of their skills are exactly 10. They also have no passions. So you can see everyone is exactly the same. That way when we're running our tests and everyone's sowing their fields and harvesting, they all are in the same starting ground, basically. So we know we're getting like consistent results. Okay. So I'm going to pause this. I'm going to get everything set up. I'm going to build these guys a little complex and set up some fields for them to work and such, and I'll be back in a bit. Okay, so let me show you what I got built here. I built a nice little test area for my guys here. I've given them all nice bedrooms, so I don't have to worry about them having mental breaks. Everyone has their own little area that they can stay in and work in. They're all exactly the same. They're all completely uniform. The only difference is the fields are different soil types. So, actually, what I want to do first is I want to do rice with everybody first. Rice, you know, is often the one people put down first because it has such a quick turnaround time. And so for beginning a new colony, that's great, but is it the way to go after, you know, the first 3 days? And that's kind of what I want to find out. So Luke here, he's got the rich soil. It's 140% fertility, so it should grow the fastest, and will, I'm sure. Pina has just regular soil, which is 100% fertility. Moody has lichen-covered soil, which is also 100% fertility. Tammy has marshy soil, once again 100% fertility. So these three, in theory, should be exactly the same. And then Gray has stony soil, and that's only at 70% fertility. So this should have like a 30% lower yield rate, ideally. And they've all got their own warehouse, so I can just count how much they yielded at the end. So what we're going to do is we're going to run this through 3 full seasons, which is 45 days. So that's kind of in between kind of the normal growing zones that you find when you're choosing on the map. I mean, usually you'll see like a 40-day cycle or a 50-day cycle. This will be a 45, kind of in between, because, you know, if you don't have cold snaps or other things, you can kind of stretch out those into a longer growth cycle, or they might be cut shorter than what they're saying. So 45 is in between 2 of them, and it's 3 seasons, which is kind of makes it easy, so I can just see when I get down to the 1st of December or whatever. I know that's when we're done with the test. So, just for fun, I spawned in a 6th little person. So Sasha here. Oh, I've put down a chessboard that isn't actually built yet. That's fine. I'll fix that. Sasha is going to be kind of a, I guess, control group, or just something to compare the rest of these two. So, he has only a 3 plants, but he does have a minor passion for it. So, everyone else has a 10. So we'll see what the difference is, starting with 7 points off. So he's just got normal soil here, 100% fertility. He's going to also be growing rice, and let's see what the difference is between what Sasha's able to produce and what these 3 are able to produce. Also, he's got kind of a more, you know, generic entry-level house and things to do. So he'll probably actually have mood problems and breaks and stuff like that. So, you know, it'll be a little more beginner-relevant look at what a typical yield could be. So, just something to compare and contrast to. So one other thing I wanted to experiment with Sasha here is I set up this second growing zone with sand. Now, if you notice, it says that sand has a 10% fertility. Now, I think that that's referencing like the growth of like this grass or cactus or whatever is normally found in desert biomes. Because if you try to put a grow zone over sand, it just won't let you. However, using the dev tools, you can lay a grow zone first and then set the sand terrain underneath it. So just as a second test, I'm gonna test this out just to see if plants will grow on sand if forced in using the dev tools. I don't think they will, but we'll give it a try. I mean, after all, it does say 10% fertility, so it's worth taking a look at. And you might also notice that I haven't talked about strawberries at all. I'm leaving strawberries out of this test just because they have a minimum plant skill to grow them, so it might not be something that is always an option. So I just wanted to use the 3 base foods that everyone would be able to grow, which is rice, corn, and potatoes. So that's why no strawberries. That is it. Let's get these guys rolling. Guess I can let them go do their thing, and I'm going to speed things up substantially here, and I will be back after we're done to talk about the numbers. So and of course I wanted to just check in with everybody and see that yes, nothing will grow in the sand zone. It did get in there and clear out all of the grass and dandelions and stuff though. So, but nothing could actually be sown in there. So here's let's try something here. There were dandelions in there before. Let's see if Sasha will plant dandelions over the sand. Ah, he will. So that's an interesting thing. I mean, no food crops, but I mean, I guess that's something. Will your farm animals eat these dandelions? I think they will. But I mean, it's still technically cheating since you have to use the dev tools to get that set up. But it's still a very interesting thing. So, we're doing science, and science was done. So there we are. Okay, we've got that done. That took way longer than I was expecting. I don't know what I thought would happen. In my head I was just like, yeah, I'll just skip time forward 45 days and I'll do that 9 times and it'll go totally smooth and it won't be an issue at all and I'll just have this data to look at. And that of course was not how it went down at all. It was several hours of dealing with fires and animal attacks and all sorts of other things. So, yeah, and even at the higher 4x dev speed, it still just took a really long time to go through 45 in-game days. So to do that 9 times, but we're here now. We've done it. Got the raw data. I am very excited to look at it. Okay, so we've got all our raw data up on screen now, and this is very interesting. This is not something I expected, to be quite honest. Rice produced a substantially higher amount of yield over the year, especially in rich soil. The reason I didn't expect this, rice grows a lot faster, so of course you have more harvest throughout the year, but the actual yield per harvest is a lot lower than potatoes and corn, especially corn. So I was a little surprised by this. Rice is on top, clearly, as far as the actual number of units you can yield in a certain amount of time. At least in this time that we ran, which again was 45 days. Now, the thing with rice, of course, is that your colonists are going to be working a lot more to harvest this much. So you're going to be spending a lot more time than, say, with potatoes or corn. But if you have low-skilled harvesters and you want to train them up the most efficient way, having all rice will yield the most food for you and will train them up the most because they'll be working more often. Now, those colonists won't have as much time for other things, so that's the trade-off you'll have to think about. But I think it's totally reasonable looking at this that year one, you could just throw rice down in your fields and not worry about anything else. Get a good stockpile going and train your planters up because, you know, if you want to get to like that benchmark of like 8 skill to plant heel root, which can be really hard to come by on some of the maps, or even just to get to like strawberries, you know, which is at 5. I believe it's at 5 now. But yeah, I think that's a reasonable strategy for year one. And then after you've got your guys trained and you've got, you know, a little bit of leeway, you can switch to a higher yield crop like potatoes or corn and spend substantially less time harvesting and planting, which will free up your colonists for a lot more. Another thing that's interesting about rice, just looking at these numbers, it appears to me that rice has the highest fluctuation of yield. It's kind of all over the board here. You can see that in that trial 1, the lichen soil was a lot lower. In trial 2, the control group with Sasha was a lot lower. It's a lot less consistent. It changes a lot. And I guess that makes sense because the more often you're harvesting, the more RNG there's going to be for how much you harvest. So that would be another thing to keep in mind. It'll fluctuate the most. Looking at potatoes, one of the things that really surprised me, but the fact that in stony soil, there was essentially no difference in yield as opposed to plain soil for potatoes. So you can see even in trial 1, it even beat 2 of the plain soils. So that's something, if you have an area that has mostly stony soil, you don't have good rich soil or even regular soil to worry with, plant potatoes. Those will grow well in stony soil. It's not going to be a problem for you. Or, you know, if you have your fields are kind of divided from regular soil and stony soil, you know you can always put potatoes in the stony soil and get a good crop off of them, and then save your good soil for other crops. So looking at this, you can see that it's actually more efficient to have a highly trained farmer planting potatoes in stony soil than it is to have a lower end farmer planting in plain soil. In some cases by a lot. Now, Sasha, our skill 3 control group, was all over the board. Sasha ran into some problems with mood breaks and other things that the other group didn't have to deal with as much. So you can see that his numbers are a lot more random and all over the place. But regardless, the stony soil always beat out his plain soil, just because of farm type. Or the farmer skill, I mean. Whereas that wasn't necessarily the case with other crops. Sasha was able to get a higher yield with rice, even with a skill of 3, over that stony soil with a really skilled skill 10 farmer. So another thing for rice to be for your early farmer, your early playthrough crops, since a low-skilled farmer can still be successful with them. Whereas with other things, not quite as much. With potatoes, I was also a little surprised to see that the rich soil still had more of an impact than I was expecting. Since the stony soil didn't impact the yield very much. I expected based on that the rich soil wouldn't impact the yield as much, but it did. It actually it grew a lot more in the rich soil, which is a little bit of a surprise. Now corn. The biggest thing that jumps out to me right away is that corn also is not that affected by stony soil. It's really almost a negligible difference, and that's a big surprise, especially since rich soil affects it so much. There's a huge jump. It's almost twice as much. In fact, it is twice as much in many cases as compared to just plain soil or lichen or marshy. That 140% fertility really affects corn a lot more than the other crops. So although the actual final yield number was not any higher than potatoes, the fact that we only got 2 harvests of corn in, and they were kind of on the verge of a third. If you have year-round growing in rich soil, corn is going to be a great crop for you. Now, there is a bit of a risk involved because of things like cold snaps and your farmers getting hurt, or things like that, blights, because that growing cycle is a lot longer for them. But for such a small amount of work, you're going to yield a lot if things go right for you. And part of what I've proved here is that things are not going to go right for you all the time. You can see in trial 1, Sasha died growing corn. He died on day 30, and after 30 days, still there was not a single harvest of corn. So I think had to have been very close to harvesting at the point when he died. But, to go 30 days without any crops, that's a long time in this game. You certainly wouldn't be able to do that right away unless you had plenty of animals to hunt or some other source of food. But the amount that you will yield in 3 in-game seasons from corn on just plain soil, not very much. It's about half that of rice. So what we can see from all of this is that all 3 of these crops have their own time and place where they actually are going to be useful depending on the circumstances. So, people that just always grow rice or just always grow corn, whatever, there really are circumstances where you could be maximizing things a little better. Now, there's always that risk reward of, the length of the growing time and how skilled your farmers are and what kind of soil you have. So that's why we tried to throw down a lot of variables here. One variable we didn't take into account is more extreme zones where the growing temperature might drop below or rise above the optimal amount. So especially with something that's a little more, easy to kill off like corn, in a couple of those trials, right towards the end of the fall season, the temperatures were already dropping into winter temperatures where it was not at optimal growing speed. So it was only growing at like 50 or 60% a day instead of 100% a day. So your temperature is going to be a factor for sure, and that will affect how you can choose between these crops. But I think this is enough raw data to give you a general idea. Definitely enough to give me a more precise idea of how I want to lay out my crops and in what environments and how I do it. If I've got a really good farmer right off the bat, I might throw down corn right away. If I don't, I definitely won't. I will throw down rice and get that going. I think with a brand new game, you almost always will throw down rice, at least in one farm patch, because it does grow so fast. You get a quick turnaround, you get some food right away, and that's usually going to be an important thing. But, whether you switch gears right away, hopefully this data helps you to make that decision. So, one final note I'd like to make, and this is something I didn't really show you, but I played around with having the crops right up against walls and in a more open space, because as you can see when the sun passes overhead in game, shadows kind of move, and if your crops are right up against a wall, shadows on screen will kind of cover the crops up. And I was curious if that was actually affecting their growing speed because of light levels, or how much sunlight they were actually getting. And after lots of testing, it does not matter at all. It doesn't affect the speed at which it grows. It's just a visual representation of what's happening in the atmosphere. It doesn't affect the crops on the ground at all. So that's something you can kind of relax about. You can just put them in a room with no ceiling, in fact. So, which might be a good way to do it. You could throw a roof on it in the winter and make a greenhouse. So, well, that's gonna just about do it for this episode of Legendary Labs. I hope this came in useful to somebody out there. I know that with a game like Rimworld, where there's been so many different versions of it over the last few years, and things have been changing and stats have changed, and I feel like this is a good final look at crop growing. In its version 1.0, it shouldn't change again. So hopefully it was informative, helped give you some more strategy in your game. And if you haven't played Rimworld, get out there and play it. It's a great game. So thanks once again. I'm Maddie from Legendary Drop. Talk to you next time.